What you are going through right now is not a punishment. I need that to reach you before anything else I say today, because I know that is the question living underneath everything else you have been carrying. Whether this difficulty is your fault, whether the hardness of this season is something you brought on yourself by doing something wrong or believing something wrong or failing in some way that you cannot fully identify. I know you have been turning that question over in your mind in the quiet. I know you have gone back through your choices looking for what you did that caused this. And today I am going to answer that question directly. What you are walking through is not my punishment of you. It is not evidence that I am disappointed in you. It is not the consequence of a hidden failure. It is something else entirely, and I am going to tell you what it is. I know the reasoning that leads people to the punishment conclusion. The logic goes something like this. If I am a loving God who has the power to prevent difficulty, then the fact that difficulty has come must mean either that I am not loving or that I allowed it because of something you did. And because you cannot bring yourself to conclude that I am not loving, you land on the second option. You must have done something to deserve this. You must be failing in some way that is generating this consequence. And then the search begins for what that thing is, and when you cannot identify it clearly, the conclusion becomes that the failure must be deeper than the specific visible mistakes you can name. It must be something fundamental, something about who you are at the core that is drawing this difficulty. I want to dismantle that logic today, not because I want to excuse genuine mistakes, but because the logic itself is flawed in ways that are harming you. Difficulty is not always the consequence of failure. Pain is not always the evidence of punishment. The rain falls on everyone. The storm does not select its targets based on their performance. The most faithful people in the history of my relationship with humanity walked through devastating difficulties that had nothing to do with their failure and everything to do with the purposes I was working in and through them. The difficulty is not always about what you did. Often it is about where I am taking you and what building that requires. I want to speak to what I am actually doing in this hard season, because something is happening even though it does not feel like something is happening, even in the stillness, even in the silence, even in the seasons where the absence of visible progress makes you wonder if you have been forgotten. Something is happening underneath the surface of what you can see. The seed buried in the ground does not see any evidence of growth from inside the darkness of the soil. But the root system is forming. The thing that will eventually break through the surface and be visible is being built in the hidden place first. What is happening in your hidden place right now matters, even though you cannot see it. Do not measure the productivity of this season by what is visible. The most significant work of this season is invisible. I want to speak to those of you who are in what I call a wilderness season. A season where the familiar landmarks are gone and the clear direction that used to guide you has become quiet, and the sense of forward momentum has slowed to something that barely feels like movement at all. The wilderness is one of the most uncomfortable places I take people, and it is also one of the most transformative. Every person I have ever used significantly has had a wilderness season. It is not a detour from the purpose. It is preparation for it. The wilderness strips away what is not essential. It confronts you with what you actually believe when the props of comfort and certainty and visible progress are removed. It builds in you a quality of rootedness that comfortable seasons cannot produce. The wilderness is hard. It is supposed to be hard, but it is not punishment. I want to speak to the silence that often accompanies the difficult season. The way my voice can feel quieter or harder to hear when you are in the middle of the hardness. You pray, and the usual sense of my nearness does not come the way it usually does. You reach for me, and the reaching feels like it is landing in empty space. You look for signs, and they are not obvious. And this silence in the middle of the difficulty becomes its own wound layered on top of the original one. Because if the difficulty is not punishment, then why does the season also feel like abandonment? Why would I allow you to walk through something hard without at least making my presence clearly felt? I want to address that question with complete honesty. My silence in a difficult season is not the same as my absence. There are seasons in your story where I speak clearly and specifically, and where the sense of my nearness is almost tangible. And there are seasons where I ask something different of you, where I ask you to trust without the emotional confirmation, where I ask you to believe that I am present based on who I have revealed myself to be rather than based on what you currently feel. These seasons of what feels like silence are not seasons of abandonment. They are seasons where a different kind of faith is being built. The faith that was only ever dependent on feeling my presence clearly is a faith that has not yet been fully tested. The faith that holds on through the silence without the emotional confirmation is the faith that nothing can shake. I know some of you have been in this hard season for longer than you expected. What felt at the beginning like a temporary difficulty that would resolve in a few weeks or a few months has stretched into something that has now lasted for a year or two or more. And the longer it stretches, the more the punishment narrative gains credibility in your mind, because surely if it were not punishment, it would have ended by now. I want to address the length directly. Long seasons are not proportional punishments for large failures. Long seasons are often the indicator of large purposes. The thing being built in you through this extended difficulty is not small. It could not be built in a shorter season. The depth of the root system determines the height of the tree that will eventually stand there, and deep roots take time. I want to speak to those of you who feel guilty for struggling, who believe that a person of stronger faith would not be finding this as hard as you are finding it, who compare their internal experience of difficulty to what they imagine other people's internal experience looks like and conclude that they are spiritually weaker because the struggle is so real for them. I want to be clear about something. Struggle and difficulty is not evidence of weak faith. Jesus himself described an inner experience of anguish on the night before his death that was so intense it produced a physical response. The most faithful people in the history of my relationship with humanity felt the weight of their difficult seasons fully. Feeling the difficulty is not failure. It is honesty. And honesty about what you are experiencing is more useful to your healing than a performed piece that does not match your actual internal state. I want to speak to those of you who have watched other people go through similar difficulties and come through them more quickly or apparently more easily, and who have concluded that the difference in their experience versus yours is evidence of something deficient in you. Comparison between your experience of difficulty and someone else's is one of the least accurate sources of information available to you. You do not have access to the full picture of what they walked through internally. You are comparing your complete internal experience to their external presentation of their experience. And even if their external experience genuinely did look different from yours, it could be explained by 1,000 different variables that have nothing to do with your relative spiritual strength. Let go of the comparison. Your difficult season is specific to you, and it is doing specific work in you that no one else's timeline can evaluate. I want to speak to those of you who are walking through physical suffering, a body that is not working the way it should, pain that is present daily, a diagnosis that has altered the landscape of your life and your future plans. I am not going to offer easy comfort in the face of this, because the difficulty of it is real, and it deserves to be taken seriously. What I am going to say is that I am present in the body that is suffering in a way that is more intimate than most people realize. I made that body. I know every system in it. I know where the weakness is, and I know what the weakness is doing in the context of your larger story. I am not indifferent to your physical pain. It moves me. And healing is genuinely within my scope, even when it has not come in the time frame you have been hoping for. Do not stop asking for it. I want to speak to those of you who are experiencing financial hardship that has stretched on long enough that the stress of it has seeped into every other area of your life. Money pressure is one of the most relentless forms of difficulty because it is present in every ordinary decision, and there is no break from it. It follows you into the grocery store and the gas station and the conversation about the kids needing new shoes. It wakes you up at night with specific numbers running through your mind. I see that particular weight. I know the way financial pressure produces a specific brand of shame, because our culture equates financial struggle with personal failure. I want to separate those two things clearly. Financial difficulty is not evidence of your worth. It is not a reflection of your value as a person or as someone I care about. I have allowed seasons of material scarcity in the lives of people I love profoundly, and it was never because they deserved scarcity. It was because what was being built in the scarcity could not have been built in abundance. I want to speak to those of you who have experienced repeated setbacks in the same area. You have worked towards something multiple times and encountered obstacle after obstacle in that specific direction. And the natural conclusion from repeated obstacles is that perhaps you are not supposed to be going that direction. Perhaps the closed doors are instructions, and the instruction is to stop. I want to offer you a different possibility. Not every obstacle is a redirection. Some obstacles are resistance that is meant to be pushed through. Some closed doors are meant to be knocked on again and then again. Some repeated setbacks are building something in you that will be required for the breakthrough when it eventually comes. The question of whether to persist or to pivot is not always answered by the presence of difficulty. Sometimes difficulty is part of the path and not a sign that you are on the wrong one. I want to speak to those of you who have been hurt by religious people in the middle of your difficult season, who went to a community for support and received instead a theological explanation for why you must have caused your own suffering, who were told that the difficulty was the result of insufficient faith or unconfessed sin or some specific spiritual failure, who were given a diagnosis of your spiritual life by people who did not actually know you or love you, and whose assessment caused secondary damage on top of the original difficulty. I am angry about that on your behalf. I want to be clear that those assessments were not from me. I do not speak to my children that way. I do not use their most vulnerable moments to compound their suffering with shame. What was said to you in the name of spiritual counsel that increased your pain rather than eased it was a human failure, not a divine message. I want to speak to the ways that difficulty has changed you. Not all the changes have been unwanted. You may have noticed that difficult season has produced in you a quality of empathy for others that was less developed before you walked through your own pain. You may have found yourself able to sit with someone in their suffering in a way you could not before. Your own suffering taught you what it actually feels like from the inside. You may have discovered resources in yourself that you did not know were there. Capacities for endurance, depths of resilience, a quality of stillness that had to be earned through the experience of having no other option. These are not consolation prizes for what the difficulty cost you. They are genuine gifts that the difficulty made available. They do not make the difficulty worth it in some simple transactional way, but they are real and they belong to you and they are part of what this season is building. I want to speak to those of you who are afraid that the difficult season has permanently damaged something in you, that you will carry the marks of this season into everything that comes after it in ways that limit you, that the person who emerges from this difficulty will be lesser somehow than the person who entered it. I want to speak truth into that fear. The person who emerges from a genuinely difficult season that was walked through with honesty and faith and a willingness to let the season do its work is not lesser than the person who entered it. They are more compassionate, more rooted, more certain of what matters and what does not, more able to distinguish between what is genuinely important and what is noise, more capable of the kind of depth that only comes from having been in the deep. You are not going to emerge from this smaller. You are going to emerge larger in the ways that actually count. I want to speak to those of you who need permission to not be okay right now, who have been holding yourself to a standard of spiritual composure that is not honest and is not sustainable. I am giving you that permission explicitly and directly. You do not have to be okay right now. You do not have to have found the silver lining. You do not have to be grateful for the difficulty before you had adequate time to grieve what the difficulty has cost you. You do not have to be inspiring to the people who are watching how you handle this. You are allowed to be in the middle of something genuinely hard and to acknowledge that it is hard without packaging that acknowledgement in a faith statement that makes everyone around you comfortable. Be honest. I can hold your honesty. I want to speak to the hope that is available even in this. Not the forced optimism that papers over real pain, not the performance of peace that has nothing underneath it. The genuine hope that comes from understanding that difficulty is not the end of the story, and that the God who is allowing this season is the same God who has already demonstrated faithfulness in your history and who will demonstrate it again in this. That hope is not dependent on the difficulty resolving tomorrow. It is not dependent on the explanation arriving before the season ends. It is the quiet confidence that comes from having walked with me long enough to know that I do not waste the hard seasons of the people I love. I use them. I transform them. I draw from them a depth of fruit that the easy seasons cannot produce. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. You are not forgotten. You are being formed. The silence is not abandonment. It is trust in a form that asks more of you than the seasons of clear direction. And I am present in every moment of it with a commitment to you that does not waver based on how long the season is lasting or how much it is costing you. I know that the most honest thing I can say to you right now is that I do not always explain the why in the middle of the season. The why often only becomes clear in retrospect. When you are on the other side of this difficulty and you can see what was built in you through it and what was made possible because of it, the why will begin to make more sense than it does right now. I am asking you to trust me with the why until you can see it more clearly. That is the ask. Not perform certainty, not pretended peace, just the willingness to keep your hand in mine through the part of the road where you cannot see where the road is going. Keep walking, my child. Keep trusting even when the trust is hard. Keep praying even when the prayer feels like it is going nowhere. Keep getting up in the morning even when the morning is heavy. I am in every single one of those ordinary acts of faithfulness, even the ones that feel like they are producing nothing. They are not producing nothing. They are producing you. And what I am producing in you is worth every moment of the cost. This season will not last forever. I promise you that. And when it ends, what will remain is something in you that could not have been built any other way. Hold on. I am with you in all of it, and I am not going anywhere. Let me stay with you a little longer because I know the things I have said so far have touched some of what you are carrying, but there is more that needs to be spoken, and I do not want to leave it unsaid. I want to speak to the confusion that comes when you try to reconcile the difficulty with what you believed about me before the difficulty came. Before this season, you had a working understanding of how life with me operates. You believed certain things about how I respond to faithfulness and how I reward consistency and how things generally unfold for people who are trying to live well. And then this season came and it did not fit the framework you had built. The difficulty arrived in a place where you expected blessing. The silence came in a season where you expected clarity. And the mismatch between your framework and your experience has been quietly shaking the foundation of some things you thought were certain. I want to tell you that the shaking is not a disaster. The framework you had was a beginning point, not a complete picture. And what the difficult season is doing to your framework is expanding it rather than destroying it. You are learning something true about me that could only be learned through the experience of needing me to be something more than what your previous framework contained. I want to speak to those of you who are the person that others come to for encouragement and who are struggling right now to find any of that encouragement for yourself. The person who knows exactly what to say to someone in difficulty and who is presently unable to apply any of it to their own situation. That gap between what you know and what you feel is real, and it is not hypocrisy. It is the honest difference between intellectual understanding and lived experience. The truth you offer to others is still true, even when it does not feel accessible from inside your own pain. Your current inability to feel the comfort you know to be real does not make the comfort less real. It makes you more human. I want to speak to those of you who are angry. Not the quiet hurt that politely asks, why, but the genuine anger that rises up in the middle of the night or in the car when you are alone and sounds something like, this is not fair. and I have done everything right, and I do not understand, and I am tired of being the one who is still struggling while everyone around me seems to be moving forward. That anger is real and it is honest, and I am not offended by it. I do not need you to manage your anger before you bring it to me. Bring me the anger exactly as it is. I am large enough to hold it. I have held the anger of people I loved deeply throughout all of history, and it has never separated any of them from me, and it will not separate you from me either. I want to speak to the way this season has affected your sense of identity. Hard seasons have a way of raising identity questions that comfortable seasons do not. What you do is going well, you have the sense of forward progress to anchor your sense of who you are. But when the forward progress stalls or reverses, the question of who you are becomes less clear. You find yourself wondering who you are when you are not succeeding, who you are when the role you built your identity around is not available, who you are when the title or the relationship or the position or the ministry that gave you a clear sense of placement in the world is no longer there in the same way. These are actually important questions, and I am glad the season is raising them, even though I know the raising of them is uncomfortable. Your identity was never supposed to be built on performance or position or role. Those things are real and they matter, but they are not the foundation. I am the foundation, and the difficult season that strips away the performance and the position is doing the work of driving the roots deeper into the actual foundation, rather than into the things that look like foundation but cannot actually hold you when the weight becomes extreme. I want to speak to the relationship between this season and the next one. I said earlier that I see the whole story. I want to be specific about what I see when I look at what comes after this. I see a version of you that carries a depth of understanding and a quality of presence with others in their pain that was simply not available to you before this season. I see you in conversations with people who are walking through difficulty, and I see the way your own experience of difficulty enables you to offer something that no amount of theoretical knowledge could provide. I see you in rooms where your story of having walked through this and kept going is the exact thing that keeps someone else going. I see the way what I am building in you right now becomes the most significant contribution of your life. And I know that from where you are standing right now, that picture is hard to access. But I want you to know that it is real and it is specific, and what is happening in this season is directly connected to it. I want to speak to those of you who have been in this difficult season for so long that you have started to forget what life felt like before it. When the difficulty becomes the new normal, the memory of what existed before it can fade, and with it the certainty that something different is possible. If you are in that place, I want to speak very directly to you. What you are currently experiencing is not your permanent state. It is a season. Seasons end. They do not last forever, no matter how long they have been going. The capacity for joy that feels absent right now has not left you. It has been covered by the weight of the difficulty, but it is still present underneath, and it will surface again when the weight begins to lift. You are not a different person than the one who could laugh and feel lightness and look forward to things. You are the same person in a heavy season, and the lightness is still yours, even though it is currently buried. I want to speak to the small moments in this difficult season that have offered brief relief. A conversation that made you forget for an hour, a sunset that stopped you, a moment of laughter that surprised you, a song that reached the part of you that was still capable of being reached even in the middle of everything. These small mercies are not accidents. They are my fingerprints on the difficulty. They are my way of reminding you that beauty is still accessible even in the hardest seasons, that I am still present in the small details even when I seem distant in the large ones. Pay attention to those small moments. Collect them. They are evidence of my presence, even when the larger evidence feels absent. I want to speak to those of you who feel guilty for the moments of relief, who experience a good hour in the middle of a hard season and then feel something like betrayal of the grief when the hour ends. As if feeling okay even briefly means you are not taking your situation seriously enough. You are allowed to receive good moments without guilt. You are allowed to laugh without it meaning you have forgotten the weight. You are allowed to experience joy in a difficult season without it invalidating the reality of the difficulty. Joy and grief are not mutually exclusive even within the same day. The capacity to hold both is not confusion. It is a kind of spiritual maturity that does not require everything to be resolved before anything good is allowed in. I want to speak to those of you who are supporting someone else through a difficult season while also navigating your own, who are holding space for another person's pain while silently managing your own. The particular exhaustion of that simultaneous labor is real. You cannot fully give yourself to supporting another person when your own reserves are depleted, and yet you keep trying because the other person's need is visible and your own feels like something you can manage in the margins. I want to gently say to you that you cannot pour from what is not there. The compassion and the presence and the support you want to offer others has to be resourced from somewhere. Let me be that resource. Come to me first. Let me tend to what you are carrying before you extend yourself to everyone else who needs you. That is not selfishness. It is the only sustainable model for being genuinely useful to the people around you. I want to speak to the prayer life that has changed in this difficult season. Maybe you prayed before the difficulty in a way that was more routine and less desperate, structured, habitual, following a pattern that worked reasonably well. And then the difficulty came and the routine prayers stopped working in the same way, and you found yourself in a kind of raw, more desperate form of reaching toward me. That raw, desperate form is not inferior to the structured routine that came before it. In fact, the reaching that happens out of genuine need is often more honest and more connected than the reaching that happens out of habit. The difficulty may have done something important to your prayer life by stripping away the comfortable structure and leaving you with something more real and more urgent. I want to speak to the future you are afraid hope for, the version of your life that comes after this season ends. You have been hurt enough times by anticipating things that did not arrive that you have become hesitant to picture a better future too clearly. The hope feels risky because hope that does not get fulfilled is its own kind of grief, and you are already carrying enough grief. I want to offer you something in the place of demanding that you hope fully without reservation. I want to offer you permission to hope cautiously, to hold the picture of a better future lightly rather than gripping it, to allow yourself to move toward it without betting everything on a specific timeline or a specific form. Cautious hope is still hope. It is the kind of hope that is honest about uncertainty while still choosing to move toward better rather than away from it. I want to speak to what faithfulness looks like in a season where you do not feel faithful, when the usual markers of your faith have become harder to access and the practices that used to feel meaningful now feel hollow, and the theological certainties that used to feel solid now feel shakier. Faithfulness in this season may not look like what it looked like before. It may look like simply refusing to walk away, even when walking away feels tempting. It may look like bringing your honest doubt to me rather than performing a certainty you do not have. It may look like getting up one more morning and trying one more day, even when nothing about the day looks promising. Those things count as faithfulness. They count more than the polished practice that happened in easier seasons because they are happening at a cost that the easier seasons did not require. I want to close with something I want you to carry into the rest of this day and into the days that come after it. What is happening to you right now is not the verdict on your life. It is not the final word. It is not the summary of who you are or what you are worth or how your story ends. It is a chapter and chapters end. It is a season and seasons turn. It is a difficult stretch of a longer road that leads somewhere worth going. I have not forgotten you in this. I have not turned my attention away from you. I have not concluded that you are not worth the investment of my presence and my care simply because the season has been long. I am as committed to you and to the completion of what I started in you as I have ever been. And the completion of what I started in you requires this season, even though the season is hard. Trust me with the part of the story you cannot yet see. Hold on to what I have already shown you about who I am. Let the evidence of my faithfulness in your past strengthen your confidence about my faithfulness in your present and your future. and know that I am right here in the middle of the difficult with you. Not waiting for it to end before I show up, present in it, working in it, building something in it that will matter long after this season is a memory. You are not being punished, my child. You are being prepared. And what you are being prepared for is worth everything this season has cost you. Keep going. I am with you and I am not done with you, and this is not the end of your story. I want to say a few more things before we are done because I know some of you needed to hear more, and I am not going to leave you short of what you actually needed today. I want to speak to the way a difficult season changes how you read the people around you. You become more sensitive to the gap between what people present on the outside and what they might be carrying on the inside. You become less impressed by surface-level happiness and more attuned to what might be living underneath it. You become more patient with people who are struggling because you know from the inside what struggling actually costs. You become less quick to judge the choices people make in hard seasons because you now understand how much harder good choices become when you are depleted. This shift in perception is one of the quiet gifts of the difficult season. It is building in you the kind of empathy that cannot be taught through theory. It can only be built through experience. I want to speak to those of you who have tried to speed up the difficult season by working harder or praying more intensely or seeking more spiritual input or reading more or doing more, as if the right amount of effort would bring the season to a conclusion faster. I understand that impulse. When you are in pain, the natural response is to look for what you can do to make the pain stop sooner. But some seasons have a length that is determined not by your effort level, but by what needs to be accomplished in them. No amount of striving will shorten a season that needs its full length to do its full work. The invitation of this season is not to strive harder, but to receive more, to stop managing, and to start allowing. To shift from the frantic doing mode into a posture of being that is actually capable of receiving what I am trying to give you in the stillness. I want to speak to those of you who have been through previous difficult seasons and who came through them and who are now in another one, and who feel something close to despair because they thought after the last hard season they had somehow earned a longer period of relief. I want to be honest with you about something. Difficult seasons are not a one-time occurrence in the life of a person I am actively building. They come in intervals, not because I am cruel, but because each season builds what the next season requires. The person who comes out of one difficult season is not the same as the person who entered it, and the new person who emerged needs new building that may require a new season of difficulty. This is not a punishment cycle. It is a growth cycle. And the fact that you are in another hard season does not mean the last one failed to accomplish what it was meant to accomplish. It means you have been built enough to go to the next level. I want to speak to what you will say about this season when you are on the other side of it. I have seen this enough to know what people say. They say things like, I would not trade it because of what it produced in me, even though I never want to go through it again. They say I understand things now that I could not have understood any other way. They say the compassion I have for other people in pain is directly rooted in what I walked through in that season. They say the faith that I have now is built on something that the hard season tested and proved in a way that nothing else could have. I am not asking you to say those things today because you are not yet on the other side, but I want you to know that they are coming. The time will come when you will look back at this season, and those will be the words that most accurately describe it. That future perspective is real even though it is not available to you from where you currently stand. I want to speak to the body that is carrying the stress of this season, the tension in your shoulders that has become so normal you forget it is there, the disrupted sleep patterns, the digestion that is affected by the anxiety, the headaches, the exhaustion that does not resolve with ordinary rest. Your body is keeping an honest record of what this season is costing you, and it is asking for care, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. The same way you would tend to the physical wound of someone you love, tend to the physical impact of this season on yourself. Drink water, breathe slowly and fully, move your body in small ways, step outside. These are not solutions to the difficulty, but they are ways of honoring the body that is carrying the difficulty, and they matter more than you give them credit for. I want to speak to those of you who are reading this alone in a moment that no one around you knows is as heavy as it actually is, who are managing an interior storm while the exterior presents as calm. I want to say to you specifically that what you are carrying in private has not gone unnoticed by me. The heaviness that you have kept from the people around you because there is no one equipped to hold it, or because you do not want to be a burden, or because explaining it feels like too much work right now, has been fully witnessed by me. You have not been carrying it alone, even when it felt completely alone. I have been present in every private moment of this, and I want to be the place where it does not have to be carried alone anymore. Bring it to me in the privacy of this moment, all of it, the parts you have not said to anyone. I can hold it, and I will not be burdened by it, and I will not ask you to make it smaller before you hand it to me. This season has an end. I want to leave you with that as the final word. Not a vague someday kind of end, but an actual coming end to the specific difficulty you are walking through right now. Seasons turn. Winter moves towards spring without consulting anyone about the timing. The turning comes. The relief comes. The morning comes after the longest night. And when it comes, what you will find on the other side is not just an ending to the difficulty, but an emergence of something in you that the difficulty built. Something real and lasting and useful that you get to carry with you into everything that comes next. I am with you, my child. I have been with you in every moment of this, and I will be with you in every moment that remains of it. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are not being punished. You are being prepared for something worth all of this. Hold on.